Welcome to episode 3 of Through Your Eyes, the podcast. And today I'm going to be talking with a very distinguished guy that I've known for a long time, who was part of the operation in the Iranian Embassy. I'll introduce him in a second, but I've been told to say at the start of this video that you need to subscribe, you need to give us a wee like with your thumb up, and most of all, we want you to comment, because your comments are really, really important, because we might reach that veteran that's sat out there and needs a bit of help. So, with no further ado, I'm going to introduce you to Chalky White.
Hi there.
So, Chalky, Iranian Embassy, we're going to get to that in a minute. But I want to talk about first your route to 2-2. Yeah, that sounded good. Your route to 2-2. Right. So, where you came from a family regiment, which is not normal for the regiment, although you'll tell us different.
Well, it's an interesting route. It's contrary to what everybody believes, that everybody's a para, Scottish, and has a gaucho moustache.
Or a Royal Engineer.
Or a Royal Engineer. However, actually, no, everybody thinks you're a para. So where's it start? I started in 1970, joining the Junior Leaders Royal Armoured Corps down in Bovington, Dorset. And the reason I did that, because I didn't know at the time that I had dyslexia, because it wasn't identified during my time through school. And basically, I ran away from exams. And I went to the Junior Leaders and found myself tucked up back in the school, but military stuff in the afternoon and school in the morning. Well, I managed to get through that for 2 years, and then you get to the stage where you have to decide what regiment you're going to. Okay, it's the Royal Armoured Corps, RAC. At that time, there was, I think, 16 regiments. That includes, because I've got to say that, the household cavalry at that time. So that would be the Blues and Royals and the Life Guards and the other cavalry regiments. So I sat there at this desk, being given half an hour to decide what regiment I wanted to go to. I had no idea whatsoever. A member of the permanent staff passed by and I said to him, "What's my local regiment to Lincolnshire?" And he went, "Oh, that's easy, 1721st. "Oh, what, the Skull and Crossbones?" "No, the motto." "Oh, okay. Well, okay, I'll tick that box then." And off I went and in 1972 joined the 1721st Lancers out in Wolfenbüttel.
Yeah, I remember I did part of my Northern Ireland training up at Wolfenbüttel, because we were going with a regiment from there. Not the ideal kind of place that you would think somebody would go from the to the SAS, is it?
No, not really. I mean, Wolfenbüttel's an interesting place.
It really is, yeah.
SS barracks.
Yeah.
Tucked away over in Brunswick. Of course, everybody forgets that Hitler got his place from Brunswick in that area. So, interesting barracks, cobblestones, armoured cars, as it was in that time. And I just settled into there. And within coming 18, in a few months, the regiment was sent to Northern Ireland. And because, being a new lad, because I was going to say the word that we're not allowed to use, that we would all use as a term for a new boy, I ended up in what they call boot troop. So it's an armoured car that carried troops, and basically we were a section of infantry, 4 sections from my squadron, C Squadron at that time, and off we went out to a place called Gosford Castle. Armoured cars were on the ground at that time, and of course the rest of the squadron was deployed in those armoured cars, and we were in our armoured personnel carrier. And funnily enough, a strange turn, we ended up doing a week in and week out swap, supplementing the light infantry in Crosmaglen. So at 18, I ended out there every other week, or whatever the rotation was, I can't remember too well, in Crosmaglen, and patrolling in Crosmaglen and bolstering up the troops on the ground.
So, I remember when I joined, I hadn't heard of the SAS. So, and I joined in 77, long after you, mate, because I'm quite young compared to you, like, and obviously, but my first introduction to the SAS, I think the first kind of knowledge I got about it was in Northern Ireland in 1980. And my first time they came knocking on the gate. I was at Maze Prison at the time, and we were on staggering on the gate, and these guys just came and knocked on the door with all this gear on, and we were like, who the hell are these? That was my first introduction. And then I went down to Newton Hamilton, and we were doing the infantry patrols around Newton Hamilton. And Pot Black was on. And we're sitting watching Pot Black. And I was due to go on patrol pretty soon, and all of a sudden they stopped Pot Black, and it was the Iranian Embassy thing. Now, we'd seen snippets on the news leading up to it, but we didn't really take that much notice, if I'm perfectly honest. And then it was on there, and lo and behold, I never seen it because I had to go out and patrol. And so I missed the live version of it. That's what we're going to go into next, and you can tell us about the live version. And what I'd like to know is the lead up to it as well.
Yeah, well, there is that. I mean, what you need to know is that after a few years in 7021st, promotion came pretty quickly up to full corporal. And in those days, there was a stack. Mm-hmm. And the exceptional got to be sergeant. I wasn't that exceptional, but I was knocking on the door. And I was watching all these other guys becoming sergeants. And reports had come into my mind, and I kept looking at my report and looking at other guys and thinking, why am I not in this queue? So I then started to think, I've got a long wait for my sergeant. Maybe I better start looking around.
That is one of the problems with family regiments, isn't it? You're waiting for the next guy to leave, aren't you?
Yeah, you're in a pyramid, and you're waiting for somebody to come out the pyramid as you make your next steps up. So basically, I looked around and I went, RAC Para had just died at that time. I wasn't too keen on that because this thing about some sort of selection and P company where people will shout at you while you're on your way, it's just not in my psyche whatsoever. I don't need somebody to shout at me to get the best out of me. I do it myself, and that's always been my mindset. So I looked around and I found the SAS, and I looked, and by circumstance, they had a visiting group came round we were in Falklands by that time, and they came round to Falklands and did a whole presentation to the whole garrison. And I thought, I think I'll have a crack at this. The regiment, 1721st, moved to Tidworth. I moved with them. I'd already put my application into the SAS, and I was given me date of entry. I did all my training and basically trotted off to selection in August.
What year was that?
Oh, it'd be 79. No, 78, sorry.
Yeah.
78. And I toddled off in 78, and by good fortune and the way my makeup is, that I got through it in one go. So I only did one selection. I was lucky not to get injuries, which is one of the other reasons why some people have a second go. And I just went through it, came out the other end. I liked everything I was doing. I didn't know, because I went through it the first go, I had no idea what was coming up the next week or the next day. So everything was new, bright, shiny, and I quite liked that. You could set your personal targets for achievement every time you moved on. So after you'd finished test week, your next thing was small arms training while we were waiting to get our flights out into the jungle. The jungle I was severely looking forward to because I've been a tanky. I've been in Germany, I've been in Northern Ireland, and I've been in the UK. And I was going to get a chance to go into a jungle. I was really looking forward to that. And so that time came, so then I set my sights on the jungle. I entered jungle selection, and I was lucky enough to get teamed up with a wonderful soldier who's probably still around at the moment, but not with the SAS at the time, but his career was magnificent. And he was a para, and I realised I had a deficit in that type of soldiering. And being teamed up with him, and he looked at me and I looked at him, And I said, well, I'll do the admin. Can you just make sure I'm in the right place at the right time and doing the right thing? And that's how he looked after me, and I looked after him. He was running around being a typical para, getting everything right and going into the right gun positions and everything else, pointing out where I would go, and I'd be going, here's the food, here's the tablets, drink, do this, let's get on. And
I know we've spoken about this before, but he helped you with your weapon training, didn't he? Was that the guy?
No, Billy didn't. No, Billy didn't.
But somebody did, didn't he? Because one of the things, because we go to Northern Ireland as infantry soldiers, don't we?
It was later on that was helped.
Oh, was it?
It was when I joined my troop.
All right, aye.
And of course, because Royal Armoured Corps is a SMG, pistol if you're lucky, and at that time you were taught to fire an SLR when I was a boy soldier. My SLR training wasn't that good because at that time shooting was done, and if you got something wrong in the range, you were hit over the head with a magazine of rounds.
We didn't do enough time on the range either, did we?
No, we didn't. And the training for that sort of shooting and that rifle does a big kick. And then when you're 15 and a half, trying to hold it in your shoulder, you need a little more help than you got at that sort of time. But either way, got through selection.
Jungle-wise, though,
6th Troop.
Jungle's one of these places, though, you either love it or you hate it. Eh?
I'm a lover.
Yeah, and we know there's lots of haters out there too.
Yeah, I'm a lover.
And another great friend of ours is, like, he actually taught the jungle course, didn't he? Like Bob.
Oh, yeah. A friend that I met when I joined, I joined 6th Troop, and he came back on his second time around. Yeah. And we became good friends.
And he's another lover of the jungle. It's one of them things I did it out in Belize. It's you either love it or you hate it, don't you?
And are you a lover or
I'm
are
a lover.
you a hater?
I'm a lover. I love it.
I'm a lover.
Yeah,
I like the creepy crawlies.
Yeah, I was like, we can get to that because we know there's other stories there as well.
Oh, there's loads of stories.
So you went back to the unit. You went back to 2-2 after getting badged. What happened then?
I joined 6th Troop B Squadron and entered the usual sort of rotation of things that the squadrons do. For instance, people talk to you and you say, do you know so-and-so in A Squadron? And I go, no. Why don't you know? Because it was the squadron that was out when B Squadron was in.
Yeah. So and you were B Squadron, weren't you?
Yeah, so B Squadron, we miss people.
So for those that don't know, what was B Squadron's task within the regiment?
Europe.
Yeah. And were you mobility?
No, I was I would say that at the beginning, I was unfortunate to get boat troop, 6th Troop. But to tell you the truth, best troop I ever joined, the only troop I ever joined, and I did take to the water. I didn't realise that actually I was a good swimmer. Mm-hmm. I was a good diver even before they started on their diving courses.
Yeah, so like we can get to that if you want, like the diving courses, because that was another massive task. And it's within the Royal Engineers, it's a big thing. So you did what we did in the diving courses, didn't you? But you didn't take it a stage further. You're using gases,
I went to the Royal Engineers Marchwood only once. I did it twice.
Yeah,
I did it as a troop, and then I did it as a unit supervisor because they needed those at that time. But also, we had covered escape and re-entry at Vernon and Gosport, and we also did oxygen and mixtures at Nelson, which is Portsmouth. So
I know everybody wants to hear about the Iranian Embassy, but there's so much more to your career than the Iranian Embassy. Like, that's a snapshot of your career, isn't it? You know,
it really is a snapshot. Yeah. And as you know, because you and I have often talked, I very rarely talk about operations and things. I like to talk about that regiment, the SAS, will take you to places that most people won't go. You'll achieve things that most people will never even think about. And the opportunities and the experiences from the scorpions in somebody's lap in a hammock to a hummingbird taking the sweat off our bodies when we heard the buzzing thinking it was a big flipping hornet. and then how hard it was to see a hummingbird because of the way
tiny,
they
aren't they?
move.
Yeah.
And so the experiences from being in a two-man klepper canoe and having an alligator when we were pulled up a riverbank run across the top of our klepper in between the pair of us in the half light as I was trying to
How was your
sketch a
pants
bridge.
after that?
Actually, I've never do not suffer that problem.
Yeah.
It's like I was the man at the front and I just leant back and said, what the F is that? He leant forward, grabbed me ear because, you're in the jungle environment, so you hardly talk anyway. And he said, alligator. And of course, well, it didn't get me. It had gone. Why worry about it?
Aye, true. So, come back to, look, everybody looks at Special Forces now and sees all the Gucci kit they have, and or alley kit as they call it now, and you didn't have that, did you?
No.
He's made do with what you had there.
Yeah.
And I look back to the Iranian embassy and the kit you were wearing there. Maybe people need to know about that.
Well, that kit was appalling.
Yeah.
I mean, I'll admit to going through selection and finishing selection with trench foot.
Yeah.
Which is one-off frostbite. So, good old DMS boots, cardboard frigging things. Anyway, wonderful kit. SAS, Iranian Embassy, we had this leather rig that used to carry all your equipment. We had a coverall that was actually a tanky coverall. It was from the RTR, who used to wear black coveralls, where the cavalry in the Royal Armoured Corps would wear green. Not knowing, of course, they're not fire resistant. So it was made up of a material that when the flame got to it, it melted into your skin, which had two things about that. Of course, one of our chaps who was hanging at the rear was getting burnt every now and again as he pushed out from the Iranians.
I remember seeing the pictures.
And his burns were severe because of the coverall melting to his skin, basically. So you had that. We then had this leather equipment rig that was got our guns and all the rest of it. Luckily, the MP5 was on a combat sling, so you couldn't lose that. But my pistol was held by a little press stud, and it was almost cowboy quality. You remember when you were growing up a kid and you got your first little cowboy gun belt, and they don't do that now.
I still do that at the weekends.
Yeah, sometimes I get mine out as well. However, it was so appalling that as I was hanging upside down, the clip came undone and the pistol sailed into the Iranian embassy.
Right, so we're getting into the Iranian embassy now. But what I want to start with is that a lot of people have seen this film 6 days. And so we were talking to a guy here the other day, and we said you want to come in and do a podcast, and he says, "Oh, I've seen the film. I know about that." I says, "No, you don't." I says, "You need to hear this real story about." So your lead up, you get the call. What duties were you on at the time when you got the call?
Actually, I was just on my way back from one of the airports where I'd done a week's course trying to be a fireman at the airport, so that if there was an incident at an airport, I could integrate myself into the fire service and I would look like I was one of them and get close. So on my way back from there, when we got in range, I had a guy called Chris with me from the Sky Gods air troop, and our bleepers went off. And I got home, and my bleeper went off again. So a quick hi to the wife, dashed out the door, and ended up in the barracks, and then got a quick briefing of load up all your kit. We're on our way to London, and we'll tell you more about it. And so we sailed off to another camp near London, and then we had a briefing on what was going on at the time.
So one thing I'm interested in is that it was 6 days, wasn't it, till you actually did this the assault, isn't it? Was it 6 days?
Yeah, on April the 29th of April, 6 men burst into the Iranian embassy, grabbing PC Lock, RAP, only died lately.
Yeah, he did.
And bundled him into the Iranian embassy and took over the Iranian embassy.
So, What was the surveillance you did? If that's something you can talk about, because that's something that's never spoke about. You must have assessed who was in there, where they were, all that. What kind of surveillance led up to the actual assault?
The only thing I'll say about the surveillance was obviously we had positioned our own snipers out, so they would be in positions occasionally looking when it was getting near times that things were going to happen or not. But let's just say that another agency within the UK who are good at that type of thing did the surveillance.
Yeah.
And so there was a lot of information gathered. And of course, the phone line was bugged. So the phone that came into them for them to use to communicate to the police was obviously bugged. So they were listening into that area of the room, and other things started happening.
Did you make a mock-up of where you were going in? Was that something that happened?
Right, there was two sides to that story. One was that in one of the barracks near the area, they did a 1/3 size mock-up. So you could go in the floor that you were probably going to go to. We weren't told at that time which areas was going to be ours. But I remember going in this Hessian wood mock-up, which actually didn't help that much in my eyes. It might have on others, but I couldn't work it out. And of course, it was 1/3 the size, so it didn't it helped in that sense. But it did give you a bit of training and a bit of idea of how we were going to move around the place. Yeah. So that was done. There was also a little plywood mock-up of the whole building that would have sat on this little coffee table and would have been about 2 foot, 3 foot high, because each floor came apart, because we are talking 5 floors, not including the basement. Yeah.
So leading up to the taxi, everybody knows what happened at the front of the building. Everybody's seen any footage, they only see what happened. But there wasn't. How many teams were there?
You know, in my mind now, I can't remember.
Well, I know you went in through the roof. You weren't a balcony guy, were you?
Yeah, not the balcony at the front, not the back one either, or from the ground at the back. So we're now talking 1, 2, 3 entry points already. Yeah. However, what people didn't realise that these big buildings, being 5 stories high, usually have a light well. Although the house would come up to its sort of apex, what they tried to do is cut out some of it, probably over the stairways, and sink the shaft down. So if you were in the building, you had windows that looked into this. Well, we'll call it the light well. Yeah. And it had a glass roof over the top, yet it went down and you could get right down into, it had another roof over where the stair was. So it sank probably 2 to 3 stories. 2 stories, I think. Yeah, 2 stories. So, Bob, the guy that I met in 6 Troops, come a good friend, might as well say Bob Shepherd, the author, who's now in America and, of course, has his own podcast and everything else. He did the distraction, because you've got to remember you need to get people to look in different directions to distract them away from killing the terrorists or trying to find out what's going on. So he blew the light well, and I know 2 teams went in that way, my team and another team, because we did 1 floor, they did another floor. So that happened. Yeah. And of course, what people have to realise now that, for instance, the immediate action at one time when we first got there was to run up, sledge the windows and go in. And it was a couple of days before the information came back that the lower windows were all armoured. So we would have been bouncing our way off there on an immediate action. So that, thank heavens, that never happened. But when you put it into perspective, the way that we entered through that light well was probably the only 100% certified entry point to get into the building. You don't know what barricades and things you're going to meet, because if we'd had the building, we would have cleared out the top, and we would made all sort of barricades to stop people from getting to it further down. You know, you close your perimeter down. They hadn't.
So when Bob set the charges off to blow that light well, was that the premise of the attack? Because were they all working simultaneously, or was that the theory?
It's not unusual. Everybody knows the standby, go, and everybody goes. Before that, you have the acknowledgement, so you're all in position, and you click to let everybody know that. So the controller would say, 6-4 Alpha, click, click. Then he would know that we're ready, and he would call out the next name. Once he got that, then he would do the standby, go. And depending on the standbys is when which distraction goes off. So it might be on the second standby that Bob did it, or it might have been on the first standby.
But that would all been preset, wasn't it?
It had all been preset. And so as soon as that happened and it was standby, you knew you were going, you wait for the next standby, bang, bang, everything, go. Yeah. You're off, and you're on your way in.
So tell us about your entry. I know we've spoken about this before, so I know the story, but
there's loads of things like abseil.
We all think everything goes to plan, don't we?
Yeah. So there's abseil ropes around the front, the back. There's people running from one balcony to another on the front. So they've got a frame charge to blow the windows so they could get in. So that was theirs. The ones at the back were trying to do something similar to get in. They were running against problems there. And, of course, they had abseiled onto the back, so they were having a hard time. Guys at the bottom came in at the lower quarters, and we abseiled, or, like me, came down a caving climbing ladder to my window, which I'm hanging there, and if you can think about it, all your kit's up here. So your gun's here. I had a sledgehammer, believe it or not, hanging down there. I had a fire axe hanging down there. And then I got my belt kit. So really, from the waist, you're top heavy. And of course, you may be held by your abseiling device there as well.
What did you use, like a figure of 8 or something like that? Was it something
a
like that?
Big metal figure of 8 thing with hooks on it.
Yeah.
And you're probably sliding backwards a bit. And that was the time that, I didn't know that I probably lost my pistol. It went sailing off into the light well. Anyway, into the building, straight down with your weapon, wait for your mate in. Well, you've obviously moved to one side. Your mate joins you, then the other two join you, and you've got your set pattern for doing the rooms and everything else. I always believed in let's bring that back a bit. I was fairly new boy, so I was always the entry man. Of course, the idea of being on that one as well, I was probably quite agile in my time then, and I was very fit. So I wasn't too worried about being the first man in the room whatsoever. But I believed in doing things by putting the percentage on your side. So if I went up to a door, the first thing that came out was a gas flashbang, and in it went, and I followed it. And that's how we carried on all the way through our floor.
Yeah.
Once that was clear, we were joined by the next lot that had come down who had cleared their floor. We went down the stairwell, and I ended up about to step off on the second story floor. And it had a corridor in front, narrow staircase. I was just about to step off. An older hand, I'll just call him Toad, because that was his nickname, put his hand on my shoulder, and I'm always grateful for this, and said, just shine your torch back and forth, Chalky, and stay. So that's where I did. Within seconds, the team that were on the back balcony had only just managed to break out of their room at the back. And one of them put a clearing burst straight down the corridor. Didn't see anything, but he thought, sod it, we're going to go in for it now. And He'd had no reports, so obviously we were getting into terrorist area. The burst came right in front of me, and then suddenly he was passed with his team, and they started to do the business, and we held on that stairway while they cleared their floor.
So once you believed the building was clear, I know we've spoken about this, tell us about the stairwell and what happened there.
Well, there's two stairwells, actually. There's the main stair, which then came onto one floor, I think on the first floor, and then there was a spiral staircase to the left of it that came up to my floor, which was, I'd now entered into the second. Funnily enough, having just done that job as a firefighter, the guys who had come out from the rear balcony, that room was in flames because the flashbangs they'd used ignited the window shutters, which makes a perfect chimney for fire. So the fire was racing up and just creating a blaze. The guy that I'd just done the course with was one of the teams that were above me and joined me, and he and I managed to get fire extinguishers and get into the back room and actually damp that fire down to give us more time. As we were dampening that room down, we then got the word to get ready for the hostages to come out. You've got to remember the operation was about saving life, not taking them. It was about saving lives and getting the hostages out and anybody else. So consequently, we lined up along the top of that staircase because they were coming from the front, coming towards the back. The room there was a flame, and before that room of flame was the spiral staircase that took them down to the next floor onto the main staircase. I was placed, or not placed, I ended up being at the top of the spiral staircase, receiving from my right and then throwing them down the staircase. It's strange things when you think back to things. And I remember people being thrown to me and I was throwing them down the spiral staircase. So you can imagine what it must be like for the terrorist who's trying to, not terrorist, the hostage, trying to stumble his way down a spiraling staircase that somebody's throwing to another guy down the staircase. Luckily, we'd spaced out that by the time they're tumbling, another guy would have grabbed them and just pushed them on.
I suppose they don't think that's what being saved is like.
So I'm looking at this and I'm beginning to realise it's got a lovely curved wall. So I'm actually, my mind has changed and I'm grabbing these people and I'm turning them so their back's going to hit this curved wall. So the next guy can just keep pushing them on and around this curved wall. And that's how we got them out. And then I heard a call, terrorist. And by that time, this guy's hit my hands and I've turned him and shoved him. We're talking nanoseconds. I've been thrown a guy from 2 feet, he hits me, I turn him, I push him, and as I push him down this spiral staircase, I notice a grenade in his hand. And I realise that's the terrorist, they're shouting at me. I then take a step forward because you could see over the balcony where the main staircase was. And I wasn't the first because after that terrorist, everyone else was calling terrorist. I'm leaning over and going, terrorist, and he's got a grenade. And he then went down and basically the risk was too high and therefore that was removed. And the evacuation just kept going on at the same time as that terrorist was taken. But another terrorist also made it out. However, he must have dropped his guns, got rid of everything, and he was thrown out. Remember, it's to do with saving lives. Yeah. So out he went.
I remember some of the images at the time of after you got the hostages and that terrorist out, they're laying down on the floor outside, and it got criticised at the time.
It'd probably be even more criticised now.
Yeah, of course,
everybody plays on a PlayStation, watches war films that are on the TV with the poetic license, and have never touched or been near the real thing. That we can go on against that phrase of the Stockholm syndrome, whereas that when a hostage has been with the terrorists so long that they start to get symbiosis together, so therefore they begin to form a bond with their terrorists, even if they're going to be killed, and it does happen.
Yeah.
In fact, this was because the reports I got back, apart from when I went out and I could see everybody on the ground, and they're all down on the ground. Sim Harris, the reporter who was going to go to Iran, and his sound man were there trying to get their visas. He was lying on the ground and he was looking at his mate and everyone else and going, I'm going to make money out of this, which fair dues if you're in something like that. Why not? Aye. And I also heard the other one is that when they found the terrorists, they then parted him from the others. And, of course, a few of the women were already crying out, don't do anything to him, he's the nice one. So that thing about Stockholm Syndrome is not a fictitious thing. It did actually happen, and there was the evidence of it happening.
He ended up in jail, didn't he?
Yeah, that guy's ended up in jail, and he's now released, and he's in the UK somewhere.
Yeah. So, like, one of the things I like, I mean, I've spoke to you about this before, tell us about the evac. Our Prime Minister at the time, when she turned up, and you getting home.
Oh, right. So, a couple of things. First of all, we were in the building next door to the Iranian Embassy. So we evac'd into there. And then suddenly, I didn't notice, but God bless him, Willie Whitelaw turned up. And of course, it would have been his head on the block should it have gone really wrong. However, he turned up and looked around, and we were busy sorting our kit out, and then we moved out after saying thank you to our policeman who had looked after us, the guy that had stayed with us through those 6 days of the siege. And he was the guy, the police liaison, that made sure our food came in and everything else. I did hear a story that they actually asked him, did he want to change? And he went, oh, God, no, they're so fun. I want to stay with those guys. Because you can't believe the antics that were going on.
Oh, I'm sure.
You know, when you bottle up 38, 40-odd blokes of this calibre in one building, the humour is black, odd, weird.
Very.
But it was going on all the time. But we got evac'd, and we went to a barracks in London, and we went upstairs into this hall. As everyone knows, a lot of Victorian barracks there, and they're all built same sort of thing. So in one place, there's a huge, great hall, probably above the cookhouse and all the rest of it. I can remember it because the floorboards were rotting and there was holes in the floorboards. And we were told to gather. And then the word came round that Maggie was coming. And then somebody had got hold of the TV, because remember, we hadn't seen anything or heard anything of the reporting. So consequently, the TV came in, put on a chair, and a few chairs came in, and we were all lined up. And then Maggie and Dennis turned up. Maggie Thatcher and Dennis Thatcher turned up. And she came in and said hello and shook hands and all the rest of it. And then the news hit on the TV. Maggie quietened down, and we all took either seats or standing. There wasn't very many seats. But Maggie sat herself basically near the TV to watch this thing. And, of course, she'd had a wonderful hairdo at that time, because she was always well turned out, wasn't
Her bouffant.
Yeah, her bouffant. Well turned out, and her head was in the way of quite a few of the guys. And there's a lot of guys that have said, well, it was me that said it. And I've got my mind who said it, but I'm not going to say. But it was like, Maggie, can you move your fucking head? We can't see. Forgive me for swearing. I don't do it that often. Fine. But it was just had to be said. And she went, okay. and she moved her head, and we all watched it. Oh, I also forgot that they brought beer in. people brought beer in, and it was Foster's. And, of course, typical B Squadron got hold of it and go, Australian beer, after doing something for them. Anyway, we drank the beer, and Maggie then departed, and we then decided then started the race back to Hereford. There's a few stories on the race back to Hereford, not my stories because my vehicle just got through in one go, but I've heard stories about a few of us being stopped by the police, looking at them going, "It's you guys." And they were going, "Yes." "Wait, better get going then." And off they charged, because it wasn't a slow retreat.
I don't imagine it was.
No. Most of us had done fast driving courses.
What was the piss up like at the end of it?
Actually, there wasn't one.
Was there not?
No, we got back and there was no piss up at the back. It was get your kit and get home.
Yeah.
And I mean, that's what I did. And I got home, and this is the second part, with the gas, because it's residual and it's stuck to you. And although you got most of your kit off, it's in your hair, it's on your body. So I climbed into the shower, and I'm having a bit of a problem, but I thought I'd got rid of most of it. And after that, toweled off, because it was very late, climbed into bed with my wife. She rolled over for a cuddle and immediately burst out crying because she got gas, because it was still coming down from my hair. So after a few choice words, I sort of went and had another shower.
I think there's we could go on for hours on this, but I want you, what happened after that? You go back to normal operations, whatever you're doing. Now, I know I can't talk about any of your operational stuff, but there's something going on there now from when you served, and I don't even know if you were involved in this, but that ambush with the IRA now, and they're looking at SAS guys to say it was illegal now.
Okay, one of the things that comes under the encompass of Op Banner.
Yep.
And if anyone's got any sense, they don't talk about it. Mm-hmm. And it's so, I'm afraid I've got to use the phrase that we used within the regiment, and that's, you don't need to know.
And I would never ask you about the operation. What I'm saying is that historically we're looking at this in a different context now, aren't we? We know what it was like in Northern Ireland at the time, and now we're looking at lawyers and bleeding hearts looking at these things and thinking that they're totally out of context now, and they're looking at prosecutions and stuff like this, which I find bizarre.
I do. We've got to remember it's IRA, Republican Army. So they class themselves as a soldier and as an army. They were taking lives. I believe the guys that were involved that died there had actually killed people before. So how do you compute that our guys are suddenly in the wrong? Were we supposed to be like a PlayStation, be able to shoot to wound, or tell them not to shoot while we sort of stood there like targets? I'm always a bit worried that the people who are making judgments now have not been involved in anything where they can make a judgment. It's all right being a legal brain. It's all right taking the letter of the law. But if you're not on the ground to see the situation at that time, how can you make decisions that are made now where they're trying to prosecute the soldiers?
And to look at them 40, 50 years on, I mean, it's totally out of context, isn't it?
Well, let's not raise the other thing on Northern Ireland where we've already had one 79-year-old soldier who was so accused on a certain action that he actually died during the process. Yeah. The stress on him must have been. So I always worry. I worry that we give an armistice to terrorists and killers, but we didn't give it to anyone else that might have been on the slight margin. I believe it was written into it. I don't know. But obviously there's a lot of people, and as we've found now, that certain lawyers have made money out of it purposely.
And I would never delve deep into that because I know operational security is the most important thing from that time. And it's why a lot of people from our era had to kind of change their names. Like, when you're going public, you have to have a different name because of the repercussions that could still happen right now. So we need to keep that and put that one to bed. Like, because I just wanted to get your opinion on how we're now looking at these things and the fact that we're even thinking about people getting prosecuted. Even Gibraltar, we're looking at was the acting was it criminal the way we did it, which is ridiculous. They were there to fire a bomb off, and kill people. I don't know what people want nowadays.
I seriously wonder. You want. Let's put it in perspective. After the Iranian embassy, when was the next terrorist operation that happened in the UK? Because they knew who was going to step out should something happen. The SAS had come forward into the limelight. So if you've got these people and they're doing stuff for you like that, how can you turn around later on and then start prosecution because it's the PC world now to do that? Are you then going to get to the stage where people, and sadly like the police, cannot do things that a police firearms man is so governed by rules and regulations, he's probably going to put his life in danger because he's not going to be able to make the decision to open fire at the right time. And
it makes you think why we would have police officers with weapons when we know they're under that many restrictions of when they can fire, and they're judged from that moment on. Whereas we train our SAS to be the best special forces still, probably, I believe, in the world. Probably not. Probably we don't have the standard of equipment that the Americans have and some other special forces, but training wise and the individuals and what I think makes our special forces better and British troops is the adaptability we have. We make do with what we got and we get the job done rather than have all this fancy kit thrown at us, like you say, black coveralls, like crap kit, and still get the job done. I don't know if there's another special forces out there that was adapted that way. But as I said right at the start of this, nobody really knew about the SAS to that day. Things changed after that, didn't it?
Yes, it did. It was probably something that the SAS wanted to climb back into the woodwork afterwards, because it's myths and legends are great. They also make people think before they do things.
Yeah. So, within the regiment, because Maggie Thatcher had been there, did more money get thrown at you for better training, better equipment, and that type of thing?
I don't think it wasn't so much the training. The training always went on really well. Yeah. Because we were all... When I've looked back at the Iranian embassy now, I believe that the SAS were 2 steps ahead of terrorism. They knew that sort of situation was going to happen, and we'd already trained ready for it. So when it happened, it was a well-oiled machine. Yes, we know that as soon as you put the foot on the ground, thing goes wrong. But because we were so well-trained, procedures allowed us to carry on. Should there have been a mistake in there, procedures would have still allowed the rest of us to achieve the aim. Yeah. So that's how it happens. So the training, I believe, is always in there. The equipment has always been the fight because it's money from government. And
so you're now then at that point the precursor to Delta, or was that before that? So you started to use were the elite of the world of special forces at that time, and probably still there now. But that kind of spurred on a lot of other things like Delta, so they were basically a mirror of yous, weren't you?
Well, their originator, Charlie Beckwith, I believe, came and did selection as an officer. He liked what he saw. He went back and from somehow, without reading the books on how Delta arrived, they then arrived. I'd like to say that B Squadron also, for some strange quirk, ended up doing the first joint training exercise with Delta in America.
Yeah. And then that kind of grew from there. The difference was, and I seen a podcast the other day about this, was the difference was that if we wanted to get a stock shortened for a weapon, that was never going to happen. Whereas Delta could just go up and say, we want this. They say, just go down the factory, get them to make what you want. Or they get 20 helicopters if they wanted. And that was so far removed from us. Like, we're still the borrowers in many kind of respects, aren't we? Like, and but they had the ability to get the finance, to get the kit they needed to train more troops and that's why probably, and I'm not saying they're better than UK Special Forces, I don't believe they are, but they're certainly on par because of the equipment they have and the numbers they have, and we'll always do what we always do best, smaller numbers, more impactful. I think we've still got the best Special Forces in the world.
I'd like to think we are,
Yeah.
but I tend to think that there's many of us that are on par because of them looking back to the foundations and how the SAS came about and what they have achieved.
When you look at it, I know you left the regiment. How many years did you in the regiment?
Well, I joined 78 and I left in 86.
So we know our friend Bob carried on, didn't he? Carried on for quite a bit longer than that. And when you look at these programs that's been out recently, like Rogue Heroes and all these other ones, the Damien Lewis one that was adapted for screen as well, and the start of the SAS and the raids they did in the desert and all this, like, that's still the ethos behind the regiment, isn't it? It's still that kind of ethos of these small teams getting in and changing things. And even when you look at Vietnam and the Australian SAS, it was there, and they went out in small teams. And I remember at the start of the Gulf War, I think there was an American colonel from Vietnam. I think his name was Hawksworth, I believe his name was. And he was talking about it. And I read his book. It was called About Face, I believe it was about. And he said he wanted to run the American troops or his unit in Vietnam the same way as the Australian SAS. And the Americans said, no, that we're not going to copy them. Whereas the Australian SAS were achieving things in small groups, surveillance, and not 200 guys into a jungle at a time. And I still think that's the way, innit?
I'd like to add, though, because you're missing one.
Probably, yeah.
It was the Australian and New Zealand
SAS
took part in Vietnam. Yeah. And do you know how many casualties they had?
No, I don't.
1.
Is that right? Aye. And they were right in the jungle all the time, small 4-man, 8-man sections, weren't they? Like, and just doing the surveillance. And Hawksworth seen this, and he knew that was the way through it. So Hawksworth, I believe, ended up losing his time in the army. He got a bit vociferous on TV, and the media didn't like it, and the military didn't like it. And I think he had to leave the military because he wanted to change to do what yous were doing, like in the way the SAS operated.
Quite possibly, I don't know. Yeah,
it's a good book, worth a read. About Face, if anybody's not seen it, it's well worth a read. He started as a very young guy. I think he joined the military at 15. And I only mention that because of the way he wanted to adapt the American forces, like in Vietnam. And rather than go out and use it into the jungle to have a big head-on fight, that's not really what he did, is it?
No.
You know?
It's infiltration and it's weeding out. However, you've got to remember that Indochina, Vietnam, was going on 50 years before that with the French. And that was anyone going to win that war other than the Vietnamese? It was just really a matter of maybe the political changeover could have been better. Because if you'd looked at the leaders that they put in place in South Vietnam, exasperated the situation all the time. Yeah.
So I probably will get away from your story there. Sorry about that. But so after the Iranian embassy, you went on to do lots of other stuff, didn't you, within the regiment?
Yeah,
We're not going to talk about Northern Ireland because we know you can't.
no,
But,
I ended up in the Falklands.
Yeah.
I ended up deploying late in the Falklands. Obviously, the ship killers.
Can I just put in there? I had a bit of an argument on Twitter with a Navy officer who, I mean, we spoke about this, who told me that nobody parachuted into the Falklands. Now, what I'd like you to do is talk about that operation you were on, what you were training for at the time, and your way, how you got to the Falklands and what happened then.
It starts with the ship killers, the Exocet missiles, Super and Dart, that would deliver it. So it's a French missile, it's a French plane. And let's say, don't blame the French because armed dealing goes on all over the place and all the rest of it. However, after a couple of ships had gone down, you remember the Sheffield was hit, the Atlantic conveyor was hit, and something needed to be done. Already there was SAS troops deployed down there, but of course they couldn't do the type of training to do that we would possibly have to do, which was to find the airfields, find those planes, destroy the planes, destroy the missiles. To that end, B Squadron.
So what were you training for at the time? I was quite interested in that when you told me.
Well, we were training to fly into an airfield and basically land the aircraft, come out, all guns blaring. Typical.
Which ended up somebody else did that, didn't they? Like, and you made your way to the...
Let's just say that things evolved, plans evolved. And so that was the idea. And then you blow the aircrafts. And of course, the possibility of getting out in your aircraft was probably nil. Yeah. And then it would have been a run. Mm-hmm. So basically, suicide mission. Yeah. Land, just take out those planes because those planes and that missile, or those missiles, as we found out now, was only one missile left. Yeah. If we could have stopped that, that would have probably been more deaths than half the squadron.
So what was your journey to the Falklands then, and how did you get to the Falklands? Because you were in the UK at the time, weren't you?
Yeah, we were in the UK. We did some training. We kept being stood to and stood down. We're going down. We are lots of final last meals because we did know that a lot of us wouldn't have been coming back if this mission had happened. But the camaraderie of, well, let's get on with it. Let's do it. Typical SAS thing. That's the mission. Let's go. Let's get on. Went down to Ascension Island. Spent some time on Ascension Island. Really enjoyed that. A few odd stories there about beaches and all sorts of things. And then it decided that a different part of the plan was going to come into fruition. We already had Operation Mikado, which is written about now. So there was a helicopter that had tried to infiltrate from the south into Argentina and ended up in Chile, and guys were trying to do it that way. And our idea was to go down boat troop with a couple of SBS as boat handlers and infiltrate by submarine. So, did I parachute into the Falklands? Yes, I did. So, as Bob Shepherd, once again, has wrote something about it, and also found out that it's the longest operational flight ending up in an operational jump.
Yeah, unbelievable, isn't it?
Yeah.
And nobody knows about this, really, do they? Like, I mean, the officer was taught, I think it was an admiral, like, was saying that it didn't happen. And tell us what happened. Like, you dropped in, and what happened then?
Wasn't just me. I mean, I was in a stick of 10 that first went in. And the rest of B Squadron flew down and jumped in. So there was a lot of jumping in the end. However, all that flight time, 19 hours, a Hercules had to be refueled twice. The refueling vehicle was faster than the Hercules, and the Hercules was too slow. So every time it got to the refuelling time, the Hercules had to climb. The refueler came over, sort of throttled back its engines and started to dive, so the Hercules could gain speed up in the dive, connect and refuel, and then off we would go again for the next one. Speaking to the flight crew, because I was managed to go and see the first one. And I said, what happens if we miss this? He says, well, we're in Brazil. We'll have to fly to Brazil. And of course, in the back of your mind, you're going, ooh, Brazil. Yes, maybe I don't want to go to war. I want to spend some time in Brazil. However, no, we flew on, and then we got down as light was fading into the South Atlantic, into the war zone. And we then got the green light, and out we jumped. The equipment went first, and then the rest of the stick came out. And I remember it going off, and I remember my parachute opening. And for the first time in my life, this thing I remember where on the briefing before we came, and when your chute's open, just unclip your reserve and throw it away. 32 pounds, because you don't want to land with this sodding thing if you don't have to. So I remember unclipping mine and hanging it off to the right. And for the first... as people know me, sometimes I'm pretty compulsive. I just do what I'm told and I get on with it. And I decided I'd hold on and look down first. And I've always found it funny because I was right over HMS Andromeda. So there you are. You can check the records. HMS Andromeda that picked us up. And I held on to my reserve until I passed over Andromeda before I dropped it. Because I'm sure, if I'd have just let go of it when I first did, that 32 pounds would have probably done more damage to HMS Andromeda than the Argentinian Air Force had during the whole war. And let's admit it, it's only an aluminium ship. Yeah. And aluminium does burn, as sadly a lot of people on Sheffield found out. Dropped it, landed in the sea. Of course, the other thing they told us to do was inflate your life jacket straight away. We were in dry suits anyway. We were all boat troop. Yeah. So we knew we could float around, but like fools, we hit this thing, and these two huge, great orange balloons appeared, and your head falls back. And I remember one of us got so annoyed with it, he just got his dagger out and ripped them off. But you sort of had to hard work to get in a rubber boat with this damn thing on. They picked the men up first, not enough, and the equipment just floated on. And we went back to the ship, and we'd lost our equipment. So that night, good commander on Andromeda dropped his buoy in the water so it would drift along in relationship to wherever the equipment was, and he could come back to it in daylight and start searching again. And the rest of the team, bar two, then flew off, cross-decked to another ship. And two of us were left in the evening, and we went down to the galley of HMS Andromeda, and the cook had done a special meal. And he said, where's the rest? And we said, well, they've gone on. We've got to stay because we've got to look for the equipment the next day. Oh, right, he said. There was 8 of you, wasn't there? Yes, there was. 10 or 8 of us. And he said, I've only got 8 steaks. It's the last steaks on the ship. And he's looking at us. And Pete, who's with me, is going, well, we'll eat them anyway. And he's going, well, you better, or there'll be a mutiny aboard this ship, knowing that the last 8 steaks had been saved for you guys. So we had our steak, Pete, as much as we could get down our necks. And then we went off up to the chief petty officer's wardroom, whatever they call it on a ship, I'm not really sure, and got introduced to CSB, Courage Sparkling Bitter. The only bitter that could travel on these ships, because they did it in small kegs that they'd put into the seats that you would sit on.
Yeah.
round the mess or the wardroom. No, the wardroom would be for an officer's.
Yeah.
It was a mess for other ratings. So there, and then we went and got our heads down till the morning. Got up in the morning. Pete looks at me because he outranked me and he was more the leader of us two anyway. And he said, let's go up and give him a hand on the bridge. So off we toddled up onto this bridge of HMS Andromeda, asked permission to get on the bridge, as you do, because you have to on ship. You don't just walk on a captain's bridge. Permission passed, granted. Captain, can we help with the things? Yeah, go out on the wings and help him. And it should be off on the starboard side. Ah, okay, right. We go out there. There's guys with glasses looking for equipment. Pete takes hold of a pair of glasses. And I said, what are we looking for? He says, the equipment. I said, what, that over there? And by luck, there'd just been a trough, and I, for some reason, saw the equipment in the water, and everybody looked at me, and I went, there! And they looked and they agreed, and then we recovered our equipment. Yeah. We then cross-decked and then joined another part of the... My mind is a bit hazy, but yeah, we then joined another SAS squadron aboard a ship in San Carlos Water as the aircraft were coming in trying to bomb us. So we ended there a few days. And then we moved on to HMS Onyx, which is an O-class submarine. So if you think of U-boats from the Second World War, it was that type of boat. Yeah. We ended up on that, heading towards Argentina. Did not an operation, but did an exercise of surfacing, getting our boats together, getting in them, sailing around, coming back to the submarine, packing up and getting in. So we did that, went to an island, which, once again, Bob covers in a story about the penguins. And then finished off the war just short of Argentina.
So the mindset at that point, I'd like to get. So you know you're going to a mission that you're not coming back from, really, at the end of the day, unless you get to Chile, I suppose. You know, so there was no pickup from
there was going to be no
from Onyx, was there? That they were going to drop you off, and that was you on your own, then, wasn't it?
Yeah, they would drop off and they were gone.
So what was the mindset? You know,
that's a hard one because you know I have read some of my colleagues' books, and you know I'm sometimes surprised with what they write. I did have apprehension about that type of thing. I can't ever remember it entering into my mindset. My mindset was about getting on with it, getting it done.
Yeah.
Hopefully, you know, that's the mindset that I was trained for. And why, probably, that the SAS has achieved such great things. Because that's the mindset.
Yeah.
Get on with the operation, achieve the operation, probably worry about it afterwards. But I still...
So you're sitting off the coastline of Argentina, waiting for the order to go. And then those that from this era, that era, remember the footage of I think it was 3-par up in Longdon, and said the white flags flying over Stanley. How did you get that message?
I think we just got told we were returning to the Falkland Islands and we were going to cross deck again, which we did. We got back to the Falklands and the war was over, and we crossed decked into San Carlos Water, and we were sort of hanging around there. There's quite a few interesting stories about that, but we decided at one time that we'd like to get a naval walk. We'd like to get to Stanley, and we catched a lift from the ship onto the ground, went to another place, and there was a whole load of 60 Argentinian prisoners there. And because we were tooled up like no one else, I mean, I carried an M203, so I had the M16 with the 40mm grenade launcher underneath. And we all had 30-round magazines. Well, that's not odd. No, it is odd because you only got issued the 20s. Yeah. Most of us had scrounged 30s through our time and contact with the American forces for our M16s. Mm-hmm. So we ended up there, and the Argentinians were there, and they were really worried. The people on the ground were really worried because they had to transfer them because the POW camp, if you could call it that, was at the airport. So they had to fly to Stanley and land on the airport. So they said, there was 4 of us tooled up. Would you go as guards? Yeah, of course. And I mean, we didn't go as guards. We went with guys who knew that the war was over. They'd had enough. And actually, we were probably just carers to a certain extent. Fear in some of their eyes was just awful.
I remember seeing some of the images from that time. I didn't go to the Falklands. I went to Belize. Another squadron was supposed to go to Belize. I went to Belize instead. But I remember the images of the young conscript Argentinians and the fear in their eyes. They didn't want to fight a war. In fact, they weren't even their enemy. That's the sad thing about the Falklands War. They weren't an enemy of us. It was politics as usual, and a crap government out there that caused that. Unfortunately, it's caused throughout the years some sort of conflict between us and the Argentinians, who are just the same as us, I believe. We shouldn't be fighting people like that.
I think the junta at that time were using a Falklands War as a panacea against the problems in their own country.
Yeah. Chalky, we could talk forever, because I mean, we talk a lot anyway, and I know there's much more to come. Perhaps we'll do something else on what you did after the Falklands. But I think for this podcast, we'll probably cover the 2 main things, which was that people want to hear about, which is the Iranian Embassy in the Falklands, and I thank you for that, mate, because I know it's we've spoken about doing this for a long time, haven't we? And we've never really got round to it. I mean,
yes,
in fact, it was me and you that came up with the idea of doing podcasts and stuff like that, and I really thank you for taking the time to come in today and talk about that. So anyway, I hope you've enjoyed listening to Ian Chalky White. He's got a lot of other stories to tell, and I think we'll cover that in another period.
Yeah, that'd be nice.
But I hope you enjoyed that. It's not often we get to hear the real stories behind these things that we've read about or seen on the TV. It's a very genuine kind of conversation about what happened and the real story. And I encourage you to listen through to this right to the end. And don't forget to like and subscribe. That's really important. But what I want you to do in this podcast, some of you have commented on the last 2 podcasts, leave Chalky a message of support and gratification for what he's done for us. And don't forget the comments. They're really, really important. And I'll get Chalky to answer for you, or I'll get the message off him to thank you for your question. And if you've got any questions for Chalky, please leave them in the comments as well, and Chalky will get back to you through me. Anyway, thank you very much. Chalky, do you want to finish?
Just remember, I might have to say, you don't need to know.
Exactly that, mate. And with that, thank you very much, and we look forward to seeing the next podcast. Thanks, buddy.